Welcome to Lawyers Who Learn, where we explore how attorneys' engagement and lifelong learning fuels their growth. Join us to uncover these journeys and gain insights for your legal career.
Zach, thanks so much for joining Lawyers Who Learn. I'm super pumped to talk to you. And my hope is that this will be an interview unlike that you normally do, something where you will, like I say, it will almost feel like a therapy session. So we'll see how that goes, but thanks for joining.
Now you got me curious to explore. Let's do it. Thanks for having me.
Well, Zach, I'm a big fan of yours. And I want to confess something first is when I saw the first Legal Tech Fund Summit, and I had real FOMO. This was a couple of years ago. I think maybe I saw it on Bob, and then Basha was posting about it and a bunch of other people.
Sure.
And I was like, I need to get there. And, I need to present there, which maybe next year, but not present, just talk. And I'll propose a topic to you now that we know each other better. And I'm just going to reach out to him. And I reached out. And then after a couple of months of all your back and forth, finally we connected. And for me, it was meaningful, right? You gave me a presentation about your thesis, and you did the whole presentation, and you were just so on it and smart, and you had it all down. And it kind of goes to what I want to talk about today a little bit. And so thank you for taking that call and then letting me into your world first off.
Well, thank you for the kind words, and you can keep going on this. This is awesome. I'm like that.
well, and so, actually, you are the first non-attorney who is on the Lawyers Who Learn. And I thought you were the perfect non-attorney to be on here. And because you're so involved in what's happening in the legal space. But what the purpose of the show is, every show generally has a theme, learning through something. And sometimes we know the theme ahead of time, and sometimes it discovers as we're going through it. And there's a couple of things I want to talk to you about. And the first one is the relationships that you have had to make and the conversations you've had to have the knowledge that you have, to invest it in over 60 companies, to build up in this space, to have 700 people at the Legal Tech Fund conference that I was just at, that the orbit that you have must be, must be astronomical in my mind, because I know the small amount of conversations I have, and when I have the right ones, I'm like, oh man, I feel great. So I want to get a sense of how you spend your day. See, my light just went on there, but tell me about the learning about all these, how many conversations you were having. To talk to me through when you're in your zone doing that and how that helps you.
First off, thank you for the amazingly kind words about the event and our initial call.
I'm just being honest, seriously.
Yeah. Thank you. And it's, and all of the kind words that you may continue to say, they're more appreciated than you can imagine. And we don't really ever stop to pause to think about it. And part of that's because there's so much happening, and we've, maybe it's because I don't come at this from a practicing attorney. Is I kind of approach this from a pretty humble perspective, saying, I don't know everything. I really don't know anything. And the way that I like to learn is to interact with fascinating folks like yourself. And what happens is if you stack meetings on top of each other, you end up learning quite a bit. A day in the life right now it's actually getting a little bit out of control. I would venture to say, directionally 15 to 20 Zoom calls with 5 or 6 calls in between the Zoom calls. So if you think, and then by the way, the team is directionally almost as active as I am. So if you multiply that by, 5, 6 people, all of a sudden you say, hey, we're interacting, with 50 to 100 people a day, depending on the day. And you start multiplying that out and say, we've been really doing this hard for about 4.5, 5 years at this stage. We've interacted with a lot of folks.
Let's break that down a little bit, because honestly, I would like to emulate that a little bit, because every conversation that with the intention to learn and grow, right?
Yeah.
I'm not, I'm building my company. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm part of YPO. I love, that's why I'm doing the podcast, right? So take us through, and lawyers for want they need to build business, they need to understand what other lawyers are doing, they want to do podcasts. How do you actually take us through the logistics of something like that? Because the hardest part is finding who to talk to, having a real purpose in that conversation,
Yeah.
making it so it's valuable.
Yeah, I mean, I want to go back. Look, we're really fortunate. People here, the Legal Tech Fund, and to folks that are not in or around this vertical, the first thing they say is, "Oh my God, that's such a small space." Now, if you extrapolate out and say, "Hey, everything that we do from birth certificate to our will is governed by a legal doc," and then you say, "Well, wait a second, legal is kind of at the core of every other functional area," or if you just go, to just continue with some of these, like, we think about software investing into law firms. And by the way, when you talk about law firms, you have like software business of law versus practice of law, very different. Then you go into corporations and you think about software into the GC's office, into the legal ops, into the business units themselves. Then you go into like SMBs, and then you go all the way down into consumers. And you think about that range, like it's freaking awesome. Like the stuff that like the scope of this space and the interactions that we get to have. And I think we have the coolest job in the entire universe, that we just get to interact with people and learn from people like yourself that are in the trenches day in and day out. And it's you know,
Well,
that's
just to
yeah.
just to show you that I know your information, there's also the $364 an average price that a billing hour versus the $19 average that somebody makes, and the just the gap.
Yeah, like if
Be able
you
to
really
afford
if,
that.
like that's one of like
I bumbled it, but I tried.
but no, you nailed it. But like there's just a couple of statements that I can tell you, like that's one on that SMB and that consumer side. That's just a fact. And it's average rate in this country for an attorney is $364 per hour. Average wage is about $19 an hour. And that's those numbers are about 3 years out of date.
Yeah, of course.
You're up to about no, we did the most recent numbers for the summit. I just haven't committed them to memory
Fair
yet. But
enough.
like if you just look at that problem statement and say, I get to have, unfortunately, consumer and SMB, we don't see as many entrepreneurs, but if you get to say, I get to have like 10 calls a week in or around people trying to approach that problem from very different ways. And like, that's freaking like,
How,
it's
how do
awesome.
you how do you how do you do that? Like, how are you setting up these calls? How many people? Like, take
You're
us
saying, you're
through.
saying physically, logistically.
I'm just like finding the right people to talk to. Well,
So high,
what are you getting from these conversations? Do you feel like at the end of the day, what's his Neo? What's his name? Neo? Keanu Reeves from Matrix, where you're like, there's a zone that I feel when I have a lot of conversations
yeah,
that I know as soon as you stop those conversations, it's like working out, you lose it. And
yeah.
do you feel that way? Like you got to keep the treadmill going of conversations to stay on top of things. But like,
Yeah,
yeah,
but everything almost compounds on itself. So for example, like my guess is I interact with you, we talk every 6 months for some reason or another,
yeah,
but like, part of what we do is making sure that the word is getting spread. But when I'm on the phone with you, like, that we do something very unique. We're the only fund in the world with this dedicated thesis. And so when somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, we're thinking about launching an idea," you're like, "Hey, and there's a capital requirement. You should talk to Zach. If they should do something, you should talk to the Legal Tech Fund, whatever it is." So I think that like every call, and we're open with the types of things that we're thinking about and our theses, and we publish them and we talk about them, and we're active on LinkedIn. So all of this stuff that we put out in the ecosystem comes back, like effectively comes back with people interested in talking to us. There's I've had to shape my conversation significantly
tell me about that.
where, like, the team has grown. I mean, it was me and my partner 4 years ago. We are now at a team of 7 with directionally 6 operating partners. So the team has grown significantly. But, so what we want to do is everybody's kind of picking their different areas that they're specializing in, and everybody's working on different theses. So we're routing a lot of information, but we're open for business in a big way. So that means that, we just want to learn. Like
Okay.
I guess in our culture, we we went through some values actually the last 2 days. We did a team offsite. And the first one was like think entrepreneurial. And the second one was like, we're just open to learning. And I think that that's really what differentiates us. And we don't assume that we know everything nor anything.
Uh, my impression of you is somebody like who's on the phone a lot, who's traveling a lot, who's putting together a huge, like, who's doing a lot. And I wonder, what have you learned? Like, is that correct? I know we've talked about work-life balance and raising a family. I'm just trying to get a sense. And I'm being very selfish. Let's say for me, right? Because it's better to talk about an individual versus like they. Like there's no real, just somebody. If I wanted to start having 5, 10, 15, 20 conversations a day to learn more about the industry, let's say there's no real selfish thing of selling, but I know the more I learn, the better off Lawline's going to be, I'm going to be. How would you recommend I do that effectively? And obviously I don't start at 20, but I still don't get a sense of like what my question would be. What have you learned from all these conversations to make sure they're efficient, that you're getting, that they're the right people, that you're not wasting people's time, that you're finding the right people?
So look, it's very, there's a lot of things we work on. I didn't say these are all amazing conversations. I didn't say we learn every single time. I didn't say we get to the right. I didn't say we get to the right people at every time. But I think that like part of our thesis is that like we're like evangelizing and helping to create a category here. And part of that means is that like you have to put the time in. It's the same way that like, it's almost like biz dev to some extent. And every conversation that we had, usually there's something that it can lead to. Like the work-life balance, like the blessing has been, I mean, I don't want to say that like COVID and change, like we don't have constant, if you look at our 64 companies, there's very little geographic concentration. We happen to be based in South Florida, but like we are not in New York running around from meeting to meeting every day because our business, everything is based in New York. So like the acceptance of Zoom and all of these things have made these conversations where even if a conversation is not great, it can be a 20-minute conversation, not a 20-minute plus an hour each way to commute. So, for us, the learning and the thesis building is core to what we do. So I can get how that can be more challenging when that's not your core product.
Sure, totally. I'll move on from this topic, I promise.
Yeah.
And so what? I'm
good. I'm great with it, Todd. We can stay on it. I just don't know how to answer. I'm just trying to.
No, totally. And I'm trying to understand to me, I just know like
and by the way, part of the summit was saying, look at what we're privy to. We have to bring these people together. But it's a self-fulfilling thing where, well, then that makes every call more valuable. So for example, the fact that you may not be interested in capital, like, which is an offering that we certainly do, but like the fact, so that may be, oh, wow, that this call doesn't make sense and you're profitable and you're doing all this stuff and you don't want for whatever reason. But the flip side is, hey, can I tell you about the summit we're doing, the community that we bring together? So like for me, these are actually all vehicles to help make not only mine, but the entire team's days more effective, more efficient.
100%. And we'll circle back because the original theme that I was thinking about for this episode, and I actually listened to Bob Ambrosi's interview with you, where the second part, this is before you did the third summit, you started talking about the summit, and I loved how you summarized it. It's the summit for the CEO. There's Glock, that's for the operations. There's ITLA, that's for was it
ILTA for the law firms?
Yeah, but there's nobody for and the companies are there, but they're there to sell. Here, they're there to learn, and that's why I love the conference so much. And I know me and you both have experience going to the GSV ASU edtech summit.
Yep.
And when I first went to your summit, we're talking about, you're like, yep, that's what I modeled after. And so the original conversation I wanted to have was, what was it like to build this summit and the behind the scenes of it versus, because to me, it's fascinating what you've done.
So the ASU GSV, like that, as you're aware, but other folks may not be. I had a prior career in education, and similar construct there, where my experience there was, I went the first year, or I went maybe the second year they had it, and I got a presentation slot as an early stage entrepreneur. I gave my presentation, and a couple people came up to me and said, "We'd like to lead your next round of capital." That went amazing. I met some amazing folks. I came back the next year, but then I came back the following year. I presented again as a later stage company, and effectively McGraw-Hill came to us and said, "We'd like to acquire your company." And then I was working at McGraw-Hill, and I went back and I found a lot of biz dev partnerships, and that was the framework for what we wanted to bring to the legal vertical. The building the event, because of all these phone calls, because of all these relationships, like, the vision was easy. The execution was easy. Sorry, the execution in year, like, we knew what we were going after. There's a couple things that are just different about events than running software companies that I'd had, or a venture fund, is that, in our day-to-day job at the venture fund, every day deadlines get missed. They get pushed by a day. Hey, we want to write you a check. We're supposed to close today. We end up closing 2 days later. Something happens. We delay this thing by a week. An event is all around like one day. Like, no matter what, you get one shot. It's one day, and the feedback loop kind of stinks. Like, you come out every month with your numbers and you do all these things, and it's kind of like, we get one shot, and it's over a 3-day period in Q4. And like, we don't get to experiment with things throughout the year.
Yeah.
We don't get to send an email out saying, "Hey, what if we try this?" Or what if we, or let's try this new product and see what happens. So I think that was the scariest part about it all. So a lot of the execution comes down to one foot ahead of the next, but there were some unknowns here. And then you have to, it's an extraordinarily financial commitment. Like, when you want to get a space like this, like, you're effectively mortgaging the house. I mean, to take a shot on these things. So I think that, you got to have strong conviction that you think something's going to be there.
Did you hire an event company to help you put it together?
We did not. I mean, when it's
the last event you did, everything you're doing in-house.
Oh, no. Now we're to the point. I'm talking about the first year.
So the first year you did it yourself.
Yeah. The first year we basically
200 people.
We had somebody helping us. Yeah. But directionally, we had somebody helping us with the physical location, like showing up, helping us negotiate a contract, helping us orchestrate the day of. But literally, like, I think it was 2 people on that side, and it was 1 part-time person internally.
Okay.
And that is now basically, I mean, there's a team of 4 or 5 that are almost thinking about this full time at this stage.
4 or 5 at the Legal Tech Fund Summit, the Legal Tech Fund.
At the legal, yeah. So
plus an events company that's you're working with?
Plus directionally, that ramps up to about, we probably had 40 people helping us at this last summit. So like, the team has grown significantly. Event company after event company. Like, there's an event company that just helps us with some of the entertainment and how you think about that. There's an event company that helps us think about the physical location. There's an event company that is thinking about like location searching for us right now. So like, yeah, this is turning.
And you had, I don't know, 150 speakers, I'm guessing, something like that.
I don't have that exact number.
You had a lot. You had a good amount.
I know we had 22 startups companies presenting. I know we had 12 scale stage companies presenting. And then that's not even the
tons of breakouts. That's all the panels.
Yeah, your numbers, you're probably right around there.
That's another area where I admire you for, because I've always obviously what Clio has done is at a whole nother level, but they've also raised $1 trillion, but they've built a system. They built it up. And I remember talking to Jack the first couple of years. I don't know where it's at now, but they were intentionally losing money on it. First of all, they were barely charging a lot for it, which is a different level from where you guys are
It's
at.
a different every other. See, I mean, that's the other thing is that like every other event. So two things about one thing about Clio. Um, I love that event. Like there are elements of that event that I think are spectacular and relevant to us. Like that, when you walk, we don't have an exhibit hall in the context that most events do, but when you walk that exhibit hall and every booth is the exact same size and
They're
it's the,
gorgeous. They
no, no, but
symmetrically
it's
look
more,
good.
it's more than that. It's the fact that it puts the startup next to the big company,
100%.
unlike some of these other things where people spend a half a million on their booth and the start. So for us, like a lot of what we're doing is like, how do we put the CEO front and center? And one thing that Clio does is they give CEOs the booth. They give these early stage companies. They make the exhibit hall even, and I think it's as good of an event for startups to be at as any event, in the world.
Does let me It's
But
interesting.
but it's funny. Why is that a great event? Like we do not have a profit motive with this event. Like that's why you may or may not have noticed there's no sponsorships.
I
There's
have
no
noticed. I've
there's
noticed.
no there's no we do not want you, and we have turned down six-figure types of sponsorship opportunities because for us, we do not want your logo on the stage if that is going to make your competitor feel like we want everybody there. There's no coloration of the badges depending on if you're a startup or a buyer or a seller. Everybody is equal, and the theory is, and we screen really heavy for this, like every person that you sit down next to, you should want to have a conversation with, and they can help you and you can help them.
No, and by the way, from the outset, it's a good event where everyone's like, "Oh man, I should have thought of that," or "This is so easy. Like I could do this," or "I want to be
Yeah.
there." And obviously, it's not that. And I know there's probably a lot of stress around building this, and it's not even like you said. This is a separate thing that's not a profit motive. That yes, the goal is to connect potential investors and companies and to find companies yourself, but it's also brand building, but it's also potentially a big distraction from your core business.
It's
Yes? Or no?
yeah, but I mean now it's to the point where there's a team that's focusing on it. But it's look, we thought that it's to increase awareness of it's to help. It goes back to the first concept. You said, "Hey, we're on all these phone calls," or I said we're on all these phone calls, and we knew that if everybody had access to the network that we have, that this whole industry will accelerate itself. And
Agreed.
the only motive that we are focusing on, the only advantageous thing that we get is somehow we get to be a little bit at the center of that. But we're not the only venture capital fund there. We had at least 40 venture capital fund. I think we had close to 90 investors at this event this past year. Like any person that has ever invested in a legal tech deal, we are reaching out to saying, we want to make sure you're here. Anybody else will look at that and say, that's your competition. But our approach is no, if these entrepreneurs are able to find capital, like we're just a small fund. If these entrepreneurs are able to find capital, that's going to lead to the next generation. As your company sells for a ton of money, well, that's going to be a whole other generation of entrepreneurs that are going to come out and be angel investing and help other people get started. So the only thing we get to do is be at the center of this. That's our motive. Like that's it. And if somebody else called us and said, "Hey, we'd like to partner with you and take this on in a big," like we would love to have those conversations.
If you were to give advice based on what if somebody wants to, I'm sure people have come up to you and so I would love to build something like this, similar, or maybe, I don't know. What have you learned over the three conferences that you've put on how to build a conference?
It's it's not a if you want to do it well, it's not a business. I mean that's the simplest thing that I think that take any other conference that's a business. And if you look at things that we do, from the quality of venue to the quality of people there to the swag to making it I think Bob this year gave us, he was interviewing people, and the feedback he got was this wasn't the best conference of the year. This wasn't the best legal tech conference. This was the best conference anybody had ever been to. And if we had to focus on, if we came out and said we're a startup and we're going to be a conference business, like it wouldn't be that.
So
Like
you're
we don't make decisions based on like financial returns. We make decisions based on like experience that each person's going to have at this event.
meaning if you were looking for big in a business, you would squeeze every sponsorship opportunity that you could. You would things like that.
Everything would be plastered everywhere, and then like there's reasons that yeah, we're here to promote entrepreneurs and do everything we can to promote it, like everybody, and increase and lift up the industry. And I just think that everybody else goes through a completely different mindset. And this is, yeah, I think
Okay.
that's first and foremost. I would, and by the way, why is Clio? I don't know their whole playbook, but why is Clio a great conference? It's not a business in the same kind of like
That's 100%. No,
it's their at the end of the day, it's their user conference.
100%. So here's my pitch for me to speak at next year's conference, and I think it's
Yep.
a healthy one in the market. Is we've built Lawline into an 8-figure business with zero funding, and raising money isn't always the answer. Building the right healthy habits and growing organically. Even if you are going to go raise money, it's the way you should approach your focus. And there's a lot that we've learned after 17 years of doing this. And I think I would love to speak about entrepreneurship side of that.
Well, two things. I mean, one, we have the scale stage that has 12 companies, 8 figures of revenue, plus. And I want to say, I'm just guessing from the company. I'm guessing a third of them were bootstrapped. Like you should be up there.
Yeah.
And then B, we do some founder stories where we talk about some of those journeys. And we, by the way, this is not like we agree with you. Like the venture capital is not the right path for.
And for me, it could even just be a person on a panel, like sharing my two cents. I thought that I will also say the panels that I sat through were really good. Like, really great people. So,
there's to give you a sense, there's separate from the folks we were talking about. The advisory team last year was 25 people. I mean, to give you like, I mean, we're weeding through 2,000 applications. We're reading through the panel. So like, we've already started on panels for something that's months away. Like everything is thought through. Every lens is thought through.
If you need, I will, if you need any help, I will volunteer my time.
Awesome.
Because I like surrounding myself with people who are learning and growing. And I love just do that. It's so funny because when I was at your conference, I knew I was going away for New Year's and I would need a week or two to come back. And I scheduled about 5 interviews or 6 interviews in these 2 days. So yes, I interviewed Basha Rubin yesterday, Todd Smithline. Sure. I have 2 more interviews coming up later today, all from the conference. And it was that same concept. I'm like, could you imagine the knowledge if I interviewed every single person here and had them tell their story? And that's what gets me going. And I know, like, obviously at a conference, you got to focus on the few people that you're.
The funny part is when you talk, like, we don't really go outside for speakers,
right?
Like the speakers, the attendees, and I'd venture to say, ignoring some of the earliest startups, every single person there has earned the right and would probably be a great speaker on a panel like that. But that's what we screen for. That's what we pay attention to.
And that's what I love about Lawline is all of our customers, 98% of our customers could also be faculty because everybody is a specialist or an expert in one area. And because they're lawyers taking courses to learn and grow. But the purpose of this podcast was recognizing that only 98% of the learning doesn't happen in the CLA course. Do you know where you're doing it next year? Or you're not? You're probably not announcing it yet. But do you know?
Not announcing it quite yet.
But do you have some ideas? You're excited?
Yeah. We're getting to it. I got I'm actually not going to say anything else. We're
Okay.
close.
All right. So we'll give you, if you give me 5 more minutes of your time, we talked about relationships. We talked about the conference. Let's just talk about one other area that, again, you came from building an ed tech company, selling that company, seeing a pain point that there is no data security around around the product, building a product for law firms, getting a lot of law firms to client and saying, oh, okay, let's build a fund to do that. And so
wait, we did
am I
have
missing something? I'm trying my best.
Yeah, no, you're there. We did have security around our product. What we
Correct.
realized was we had the most sensitive data you can imagine. I see pictures of your kids behind you. We had we had access, we had we had kids' grades, we had kids' social security numbers, all the stuff you don't want on the internet. And not one of our customers at the time had asked us about our security practices. So we thought there was a vendor risk opportunity to help schools manage all of their vendors because other people weren't as good actors as we were. And and then that ended up quickly. The law firm that we went to form our company with said, no, we need this for a law firm.
Yep.
So the company pivoted immediately on the first day it was incorporated to serve law firms. Got to see lots of vendors in and out, realizing there's nobody covering this community. Started angel investing into this, and then direction about 6 years later launched the fund.
And I mentioned to you before the podcast, we have a mutual friend, John Zerdin, who I went to college with the GW. And at Cocktailers, there's bits and pieces where he was sharing me the origin story. I don't know if it was in Snowmass or something like that. There was a conversation. Well, how do you go to tell us about the learnings of sort of building a fund and, what you thought it would be like and what it's been like?
So it's a much longer. I've been involved with a couple. I've been so fortunate. I've led a couple early stage companies that have had some successful exits. I've invested in some things that have had successful exits. And the thing that I didn't realize, like a lot of these were relatively quick, 4 or 5 years. And so I think the biggest learning that I have is just I didn't realize how long, well, two things. I didn't realize how bad the feedback cycle is within a fund where
What does that mean?
we go out, we raise some capital, we start investing in companies, and we don't know how we're doing. We directionally understand our companies, like some of them look like they're doing well, but we don't really know until those companies have monetization events and they exit. That is every bit of a 10-year journey, if not
Right.
longer, especially because we particularly our focus is earlier stage investing. So we're finding and we have already in the first 5 years seen the companies that I mean, you're excited about every company, but we thought we had some grand slams and they're turning out not to be that. We've seen companies that we thought, we're going to run into a lot of challenges that are turning into grand slams. So, and it's almost like you operating a business every month, you know how you did. For us, it's like, yes, we understand what's happening in our businesses, but it's a 10-year, but like, because the business had a good month, that doesn't mean that we realize anything. It's kind of all compounding for a 10-year journey. So that feedback loop is just a lot longer than I had anticipated. I think another thing is I didn't realize how hot this space would become and how AI would just have a target on this space. You know, all that being said, that like it was not in our thesis. We knew this space was like way behind even something like K-12 education. So we knew we could keep busy for the rest of our careers investing in companies that are helping on workflows or things along those lines. What we didn't realize is just the order of magnitude of change that's going to be coming. And I'll give you one more thing to tease it out and then I'll turn it
Yeah.
back. But like,
Yeah.
so you have all this AI stuff now that is basically saying, hey, we can, you know, ch- change that we can add efficiencies and we can add improvements to every process you can humanly imagine. But then at the same time, we have, which this we did know going into it, we believed you were going to see some deregulation or re-regulation. So not only do you have like efficiency on one side, but you have like infinite opportunities to rethink about business models on the other. And like you put them together and it feels like we're sitting in the center of a perfect storm. And there's going to be an amazing 10, 15 years ahead of us when it
Eh,
comes to
eh,
innovation.
Well, I think, yeah, it's what I wrote down just now when you're saying it. It's sort of like you're at the right place at the right time. And
Yeah, and that, but I don't want to make it seem like that was intentional. Like
no,
that, yeah,
totally. But there is a clairvoyance to it too. It's like,
yeah,
wasn't intentional. Nobody knew where we were going to end up. But certainly like what I hear from you saying is like the alternative practice of law, unauthorized practice of law, I'm sorry, where software company, if that can shift and software companies can practice law, so similar to in the UK or other areas, or PE firms can get more involved in law firms and similar to what they're doing in the dentist space, things potentially will shift a little bit faster. Do you
yeah.
feel like you need to have a lot more money though? Like it feels like, do you feel like a kid in a candy store where like if you had $100 million, $1 billion, like you can go crazy?
Yeah, I mean, look, the other thing is I don't forget another learning that I had, and I don't think this was directly what you were asking, was just there's a lot of capital upstream from us.
Right.
So we're almost okay playing at the ideation stage and the earlier stages, the seed, the series A, the series B, where as you go upstream, there's a lot more there's just a lot more capital available because things look like widgets. So anybody can invest in a widget. But down here, the industry expertise is kind of a game changer. So like you don't want the earliest stage companies. You don't want to start a company with $100 million in the bank. Like you want to be able to go through the stages,
Yeah.
take a couple dollars, build a product that makes sense, see if customers like it, see if they renew. So like, no, I don't necessarily think that $1 billion would be the right type of
Why
answer.
did you choose? Why did you choose the early stage?
It's what
Like,
I know. I'm an entrepreneur.
okay. Okay.
Basically, I've done this a couple times. Was involved, helped a lot of friends get companies off the ground. Was an angel investor, and I
It's what
mean,
you're passionate about. It's
it's what
like,
I'm passionate about. And I've made every mistake you can humanly make. And my initial inclination to being on this side is just like, if I can stop you from banging your head against the wall for a month at an early stage, and just be like, no, this is 80% right. Go. That can have huge outcomes.
can you someone who's never raised money, right,
Yep.
and is not so educated in this area? All right, I'll put my thumb down and give me a thumbs up. Can you explain the business side of being the early stage investors? Because, like, for my um, in, the story in my head is the early stage investors always they don't get the big money. Like it's the later stage. And so how like what is the business model concept of like you put $500,000 into a small business? Like how does that by the time it gets downstream, like what kind of return? Because you said it's 10-year cycle. So there's a
Yeah.
long, just take us through sort of like how the returns work in this type of area and like what
Yeah, I mean,
is it
the
the one in
way.
10 you want to be a home run or something like that?
So, look, I think that every industry, every vertical has its different characteristics. We are historically the venture business is like it's almost like the movie studio business. You make 10 films, you want to have one of them become a blockbuster. You're not as concerned about the other ones. I think that in this vertical, um, specifically, we see some higher barriers to getting started, meaning like to get this is a space where it's hard to get people to change their habits. Flip side is once somebody changes their habits, it's hard to sell into these customers. It's also hard to get out of these customers. So it actually creates a little bit different of a profile
Yeah.
where from our end, yeah, what we're trying to do is we went out, we raised capital from investors. Our first fund was about $28.5 million. And we are trying to we've deployed that so far into 64 companies. And it's not
Are you
as
trying to get a 2x of that, 3x of that? Like, what
we are
is it?
we are trying, like the way that we get paid and that other private equity funds get paid is you get paid a piece of the profits.
Sure. But do you
So
have a hope of how big, like, or do you
yeah,
not? I don't know if you've even
no,
put,
no, no, no. I'm not
yeah,
only our hope is that every single company in our portfolio reaches their full potential, and you add that all up, and that looks like, some very large
100 million
return.
plus, 150 million, billion
Yeah,
dollar.
much more than
Right.
that. I mean,
One of them becomes a unicorn, and then that changes everything.
or multiple of them become
Yeah.
unicorn. I mean,
Yeah.
I
Fair
mean, I
enough.
mean that's what we aspire to do, and then
Got
what
it.
happens is, some end up being, hopefully something ends up being a unicorn. Hopefully something ends up being in between. Hopefully something ends up getting us our money back. And maybe some don't make it along the way. You add all that together, and that means that our 28 and a half, we return a lot more than that.
Got it. So to sum this up, you're having conversations, a lot of conversations a day. You're traveling to different conferences.
Yep.
You're
Traveling to, we sit on boards of companies.
yeah.
We are looking at different companies. Um, I am going to I'm going to I live in Florida. I'm going to Austin, Texas tomorrow. I'm going to Dubai on Saturday to meet with the Big Four accounting firm that's having a conference for general counsels. And they asked me to present on trends and things that we see there.
Amazing.
I'm meeting with our investors. I am yeah, like those are, but all these stakeholders are all very interconnected. We've publicly announced investors in our fund, like law firms like McDermott Will Emery, companies like DocuSign. So the neat part is when I get to spend time with the DocuSign
DocuSign
team,
is investing in your fund.
they invested in our first fund. Yeah. So like when
Yeah.
I get to spend time with DocuSign, I I get to learn about the types of things they're looking for. I get to introduce them to some of our portfolio companies. I get to talk to them about the things that we're seeing.
Yeah.
And maybe, if we're looking at something, we would send it their way to say, hey, is this of interest to you?
And again, I circle this all back to the way I started it. And I don't feel there's never a magic answer. And I don't feel like I did a good job at trying to get to what I was hoping to get, which I'm not even sure what I was hoping to get, but it comes down to relationships.
Yeah.
And
That's all that our industry is. It's all we're trying to do is help some other people out
yeah,
in the all in the effort that when you go to start your next company that's going to be a unicorn, that you call us up first and say, wow, I want the legal tech fund on my team.
but it's relationships, but it's from every conversation, taking a nugget of information, using that to then regurgitate that from your own knowledge, like to add something to it, and then growing from that.
I said
That's how I vision.
I said something. I don't know if you caught my opening speech at the summit. It was
I
directionally.
didn't. I was late. So
Direction a 35 or 40-minute speech talking about every trend you could humanly imagine. And the first thing I said was, or I'm pretty sure I said this, was just like, we get to stand on the shoulders of giants.
yeah,
Like if we see further, it's only because of that. And the giants in this case were all the people in the room.
yeah,
So all we are trying to do, yeah, and we are just trying to connect the dots for others, help our companies, help the industry, you know,
yeah,
and I think good things will happen.
yeah. And like you just said, you're not only getting information, you're sharing it and teaching it. And in order to share and teach it, you got to communicate it effectively. In order to communicate effectively, you have to know it.
We go to legaltech.com, shameless plug. We publish everything we invested in, we basically publish our thesis. Here's why we did this. Here's what we think
Yeah,
the future world looks like with this company. Here's what I think that what they're doing is special. Hey, we put out market maps. Like, do we put out market maps with 250 companies on it? Yes. 8 of them are ours, but there's 232 that we're promoting that are not ours.
you just remind me what super impressed me early on was Nate Schnorr's last
Yeah.
name. His weekly or whatever his monthly, what's being invested in.
We didn't know what to call it in the earlier days, so we called it Nate's News.
Yeah, there you go. All right, you've been more than generous with your time, and I know you probably have a call like in 11 minutes.
Do we have a record here? Because you told me the record was like 30 minutes, and I think we've exceeded that.
I was trying to make it a record. if I'm going to be honest, I am disappointed with my performance on this podcast. I'm gonna reflect on it to see what I could have done better. But because look, to me, it's speaking to you. There's so much to learn. There's so much that you're doing that 99.9% of people aren't. And I was trying to figure that out, and I don't feel like I've gotten closer.
So here's the deal. I will, I'm happy that you didn't get this to your full potential, because why don't we do it again in 6 months, and
Fair enough.
we'll take it any direction you want to go.
And we'll do it in person, because my in-laws are in Miami, and so I'm there all the time.
I'm in New York. Yeah, no,
either or. All right, perfect. Well, good luck in Dubai and in Austin. And if you need anything or you think anything, I'm here to help.
Thank you.
And I mean that. I do.
And thanks everybody for taking the time to listen.
Yes. Take care.
Thanks.